Welcome back to Madame Tortuga's Lounge with your host, the neurodivergent, mentally ill, non-binary, polypan, pagan Pisces, Dottie the Psychic, a Metro Valley Pagan Pride affiliate.
Hello, my darlings, and welcome to another episode of Madame Tortuga's Lounge, the shameless self-promotion. Today, we are actually doing like a whole book promotion. I don't know if y'all can see that. Heathen Tradition of Pennsylvania Dutch and Or-glawe-veh Primer. I love the art. So we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. I've even got my husband on this because he actually really enjoyed the book. So he's going to be better at bringing stuff up in case I forget.
No pressure.
No pressure.
We forget too. We wrote the book and then our brains died. But
Yeah.
You know what's fair. Okay, so we have Robert, Michelle, and Stacy. Because that's the way it is on the book. I just realized it.
Mm-hmm. On my screen, that's the way it is.
well, of course, Stacy, you perfectionist.
Okay. So before I get started, you can definitely find this on, this is a Llewellyn Press published. We listened to the Audible version.
I'm sorry.
We will get into why that is funny. But so before we get into why that is funny, I think we do need a little bit more about what it means to be Pennsylvania Dutch.
Okay.
So let's start there.
Okay. Well, the Pennsylvania Dutch we're an ethnic group that descends from the people who made the migration from the German lands of the Holy Roman Empire, principally, but not totally, to the ports of Philadelphia, Baltimore, and even New York and New Orleans between 1681 and actually 1683 would be the beginning of the migration, and roughly the War of 1812. And most people, when they think of Pennsylvania Dutch, they tend to think of Amish Mennonites, but the largest religion within the Pennsylvania Dutch is Lutheran, followed closely by United Church of Christ. And religion, obviously, for many people, was the motivating factor to leave Europe. But the 30 Years' War was from 1618 to 1648 was destroyed and laid to waste the economies of the lands that many of these migrants came from. And we were the first people to arrive on these shores as refugees, not colonists, and which is a very important thing for people who are Pennsylvania Dutch to remember. We were sheltered first in the Netherlands by people who helped us leave Europe, and then also in Philadelphia by the Quakers and other colonies by the Crown or various entities, churches, and we owe that a debt of repayment and gratitude to people who are trying to come here for the same reasons that our ancestors did. And so our language is the result of all these different German dialects coming together in a rough area, and then went through a period called the leveling out, roughly like a 30-year period from the late 1600s to the early 1700s. And it continued to level up as more people came in from different regions, and it took on its own identity and took root here. I don't actually consider it a dialect, although everybody else calls it a dialect, but 300 years of separated history from Germany, our language is different. There's a lot of false friends, like words that look that they might mean the same but don't, and our cultures are definitely related, but we are definitely unique. So and so that's who we are. And
We'll definitely, because I definitely want to get into a little bit, because the next question I want to ask, I know that you can go on about your history, and I really love hearing that. But I want to talk more about, because it is a Germanic, but American tradition, and I know that it is a heathen tradition, and I was wondering, there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about that. First, like what is a heathen?
Okay, well, heathens and pagans are actually kind of the same thing. I mean, they actually both mean relate to the countryside, except one is heathen is of Germanic origin linguistically, and pagan is of Romance language origin. I guess probably Italian, but so essentially just when the cities were converted first, then the old religions were out in the countryside. So it was a religion out on the heath, a heathen religion, and same applied to pagan. And generally, I could there, even though heathen is a Germanic word,
Right.
I think it's applied to Slavic heathenry also. People don't really call it Slavic paganism. They might call it Romava or Or-glaw-veh, depending on what form they take. But heathen, I think, tends to refer to the religions that stem from cultures from the north, while pagan seems to be more from the south.
That's generally when I explain it. How I explain it in a very simplistic form is that heathen refers to those northern traditions or northern areas of Europe and the far western parts of Asia, and then pagan refers to those who follow the traditions of southern Europe and into the British Isles.
And this is in contrast to the biblical use of it, which in English came from the meaning of the Germanic religions or the northern religions, but they use it in a context of anybody who's not of an Abrahamic faith of Judaism or
Right. Yeah, the difference between a capital P pagan and a lowercase p pagan.
Mhm.
You see, and I actually don't really care for the lowercase h in heathenry, because maybe in the older context, but we don't lowercase Lutheran, we don't lowercase Calvinist, so
Right.
I don't lowercase. But pagan, I think it's different. I think pagan actually has a more appropriate use of the lowercase p sometimes.
I do not. I think you're right with it, because that's why I think of the capital H and the capital P, and tend to think of the lowercase h and the lowercase p as almost being a bit of a I won't say derogatory term.
And so I was just going to say a
Diminishing.
bit of an insult to when
Or
people
diminishing term, like
right.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times if you see that in old literature, it's often referring to like First Nations people, or I think I ran across.
And it's almost always prefaced by filthy or some other derogatory descriptor.
Hey, we're clean heathens. Everybody here.
I think in that context it was interchangeable with, at the time, the word savage or barbarian or any one of those synonyms that you want to throw in there. That's when the lowercase p is used or the lowercase h is used.
Right. Kind of like in which, I mean, a lot of these are reclaimed, claimed for the first time, some of them, but we've taken these terms that would have been derogatory and have now given them better purpose.
Absolutely.
Because I know people who still, I remember even my father, he referred to himself as a non-denominational, unorthodox heathen, to basically say that he did not believe in the structure of religion. And it's funny now that has its own connotation, its own sort of series of practices.
Mm-hmm.
So a thing I wanted to bring up is when we do think of heathen, most people do tend to think of the Offsetru pantheon, or the warlike people. And one of the things that even said in the book that this is not a religion of war, it is a religion of agriculture, I believe was
primarily driven by that. I mean, farmers fight when they have to, but
and they can, believe me.
And the Vikings, they had farmers and they had merchants too. It's just where they stem from. I mean, the difference is that the Norse religion, Offsetru, or however you want to call it, back then, how they would have called it, which I don't know if they ever had an official name for it, but their old beliefs, were stemming for the culture that they lived in. But that region was still more of an outpost than of the main center of the Germanic peoples. And so I remember people discussing this in the past. It's like what we're reading might be like as if like things that came out of Wisconsin when it was still one of the Northwest territories, representing all of the United States or something like that. But it was never monolithic anyway. There were a lot of common themes or deities who were known across various cultures with different differences. And a lot of our stuff, like we don't claim to be unbroken. We claim to be an organization of very old things based on things that we've come across that are still living in folk tales and all sorts of things. Counting out rhymes is an oddly large one, and superstitions and all these.
Oh, yeah, no, the superstitions, like the monsters. That's not fair. The beings, like such simple names, like the milkman and
milkmaid. Yeah, we don't. Yeah. Yeah, the milkmaid and the wood chopper.
The milkmaid and the wood chopper.
Yeah, the one. The wood chopper is the one who tries to get you after you die before you make it to the mill, so they can keep your soul out of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And I'm pretty sure that Michelle and I would walk off into the woods with the wood chopper. But yeah,
all they got to do is show me a book. I'm there.
Yeah, because they shift their shape to be whatever you desire most. So, and the milkmaid does the same thing, but after emerging from the mill.
Interesting. I know, it's a very rich. I loved the forest of the world trees, and I wanted to say another thing that stuck out was the difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy, but I really do like the
cosmology.
Is that the word I'm looking for?
Maybe. Yeah.
the world, I want to say world building, but that's not really.
Well, the worldview or the cosmology and is and there's still stuff that we don't even have, like little tidbits of things that we don't actually know which realm they came from, but they didn't come from this one, things like that. And just the sheer number of beings, and I remember people actually getting into near altercations over the difference between things like a house elf and a barn elf. And it's sort of funny.
You know what? Let's talk a little bit about, because this is not this is a whole faith system. This is not this is something that the three of you have researched and put a lot of time and effort in. Can you talk a little bit about your process?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start that part. I grew up, with one foot in the plain culture and one foot in the fancy culture, which is, to explain it shortly, the plain part of the culture, that's the sectarian religions, are the people who dress plain, and the non-sectarian, or they call the fancy Dutch, that's the people who are more mainstreamed in their appearance and things like that. And I've heard of Braucherei and Hexerei throughout my entire life, and I went to both medical doctors and Brauchers, and I come from a medical family, and the culture was very rich and present. And I remember being a kid about 4 years old, and we were outside. It was a kind of a warmish day for January, and all of a sudden there's all this noise around us, and my great aunt is looking and said, "Get inside," because the Ebeker Jaeger was out on his errands, and that noise was the warning that he could run you over and not even realize that he did it. She was saying this as seriously as a heart attack. She was literally saying this, and then we went inside, and and she explained to us, he's bigger, and he's on errands that we don't understand, and so I always had that in my life. But I really began to appreciate it as I got older, and shortly after Or-glawe-veh was established, and it was established in a weird way. I'd always heard the call of multiple deities, and I didn't really understand. I consider myself pretty hardcore Christian, not really just how many old inputs were around me, and because I didn't realize it was different. Like I didn't realize that the rest of the country didn't eat these donuts on on Shrove Tuesday. I didn't realize that was something that
Or
was
do the big, huge harvest home when,
yeah, because that was what I knew. And I think we all had that experience. Like you didn't know until you went away to college or something like that, or you went somewhere and you talked about it and people looked at you like, what? And so then we actually got enjoyment off of watching the kids from New Jersey eat the donuts and like them and eat another one, and then you wait about okay, now we wait, and then a few minutes later like, oh, because of all the lard that's in them. But then I knew some of the Braucherei charms and things like that. I even tried to use them on the computers that I used to work on when I was in IT, because every computer was unique. It had its own spirit, and so I could install the exact same things on computers, and they would treat them differently. And so I really wanted to learn it, more officially. But Or-glawe-veh came into being by accident, and it began in September of 2007 when I finally realized that I really kind of need to understand what's going on with what the presence is that I'm sensing. So I went out to I was actually in my parents. They had a house down in where was it? Naples, Florida, and so I said to my partner, I was like, I want to go to a bookstore and find a book on Hinduism. This was the only religion that I understood to have multiple deities. So I went there and I picked up a book that was like roughly the equivalent of Hinduism for Dummies or something like that. That wasn't the actual name, but something like that. And as I was reading the book, I came across the word Asatru, because the author of this book was of Norwegian descent, and she mentioned the relationship between the deities of Hinduism and the deities of Asatru, and just how the derivations and the spread of Proto-Indo-Europeans across the world had influenced the pantheons. So I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. That's a little closer to our culture. I ordered Diana Paxton's Essential Asatru, and when I came back from Naples, it was here in Bristol. And as I read the book, that's when the brick hit me on the head. I was like, wait a minute. These gods and goddesses that they're talking about are the helpful entities from Braucherei that can intercede for people. And that's when it suddenly made sense. And so I began to think this through in my mind. And I thought, you know what? Well, we have lots of stories about that. And so my original thought was to kind of take what we had and to flex it in with, the Norse stuff that was already out there, not realizing that they are similar, but they're not the same. And we had a much more thorough story of the body of knowledge and lore than I thought, because I officially entered the Braucherei training in 2008, because one of the people on the list, the Yahoo list where these discussions took place, was my Braucherei mentor then. And there was this stupid little Hexenkunst Yahoo group that was acquired years ago, earlier in that same year, 2007, by Patricia Niedrich, who I consider to be the co-founder of Or-glawe-veh. Through the conversations there and everything, I realized that, you know what, we can't flex this in with the Norse stuff, because the Norse stuff is the Norse stuff. We have our own thing. And, so Or-glawe-veh was founded in Yahoo. And we don't claim to be unbroken, as I said earlier. We are a new iteration of the ancient Germanic religions as seen through the lens of our culture. And, a lot of it is stuff that we have that people never realized was pagan, or a lot of things were realized to be pagan, but the connections among them were not made. And, oral traditions were not written down, and there was no reason that they couldn't be. It's just that people didn't do it. So we began to take the oral traditions and to write them down, because a lot of the people I was interviewing were really elderly. My Braucherei mentor's mentor Dennis Boyer, wrote a book called Once Upon a Hex, and he had done 80 interviews with elderly practitioners of Braucherei. My mentor and her husband did 8 more, and since 2008, I've done what's my count? I think 176. And that number really began to expand when we included Hexerei practice.
And I think the older practitioners are realizing it hadn't been passed along. Maybe it's time to tell someone before
it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, the Hexerei thing was particularly touchy because a lot of them want to stay underground because of the satanic panic and all those things. And both practices were harassed, during the interwar period. But I had to do some strange things to get some interviews with some of these practitioners. And the only reason some of them would actually talk to me is because I spoke Pennsylvania Dutch. And I would have to get a voucher from somebody that they knew who knew me well enough to trust. I had to show up with this voucher. If I didn't have it, or if they thought it was fake, they would not talk to me. And that was really interesting. And some of them had things that I never thought about, like the people who had stories from the Spanish flu of 1918 and the comets that came before that, and the beliefs that the comets brought this plague to the world. And there was all this interesting stuff that came out of some of those interviews. But so that's where it came from. And I was not allowed to divulge the names, but most of them I had to write in code. There was supposed to be no way to identify many of these people except the nickname, and that's common even with Braucherei practitioners many times. I say it's like our generations, the current generations that are actually more open with our practice, but who knows?
People don't realize how close. It's funny how we've got pagan prides all over the place, but 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was not like people were held up in them hollers.
But ironically, though, most practitioners would not have considered themselves anything but nominally Christian. They would not have considered themselves to be pagan or heathen. They still, most of them used the Bible to practice their faith. So,
but interestingly, of the Hexerei practitioners that I interviewed, there was only one who even believed Satan was real.
Huh.
And she wanted nothing to do with him.
Fair enough.
And Satanism, by the way, the belief in Satan does not relate to the Hexerei that actually is practiced in Pennsylvania, among the Pennsylvania Dutch. What it is much more earth-based and much more pagan in its origin. They refer to helpful entities too. It's a lot clearer that there's more to them than just, just helping to heal people.
That is interesting because we have like the English speaking United States idea of what Christianity is, and we tend to forget that much like paganism, it is a very, very broad umbrella, and especially with a language barrier, I'm sure that the Christianity that you grew up with doesn't look like the Christianity that might be going on in the, what was it you call people who are outside the
English.
The English? Yeah, the English, that's a good one.
Well, the only people who really still do that are like the Amish and Aldermen. I say most everybody else just refers to them as regular people or whatever. Fancy people.
People. Sorry.
What were some of the challenges that you ran into trying to separate out because like Or-glawe-veh is its own system, its own faith system.
The assumption that every deity that they have, we must have present, and they must be in the same hierarchical order as their deities.
Well,
our deities are very similar, but they are not nearly the same. Our chief deity is Hola, so right there, our chief deity is a female, whereas certainly not in the heathen groups that we associate with, but in a lot of the other types of heathen groups that would be like, unheard of.
Oh yeah, I know there's, I mean, I hate to say it, we are all aware of the racist in the room when we talked about heathenry, unfortunately.
But fortunately, I feel like when you speak it, it gives you power, and we very much speak our truth that we are inclusive. So,
And yeah, I mean, I would say that Or-glawe-veh defines itself as being inclusive. And so if somebody is being exclusionary, they're not being Or-glawe-veh. But the other thing I want to mention with the hard difficulty to separate, a lot of it, between Christianity and heathenry was fairly easy to recognize. There were even some charms that the ending of it should rhyme with hola, but instead it had God, our Father, or whatever in there. The hardest things to separate were things that were of Gnostic origin, that came in. There's some things that we flat out really were unable to determine. Is this like old Germanic practice here, or is this something that came in from Gnosticism? And at one point along the way, my co-founder was Pistol Pink Sip Shop, Deborah Wheeler, and I just decided, you know what, we have what we have, and we don't know where these came from, but if it was still part of our culture and it was still consistent with our values, then we're just going to say this is what we use. And,
which, interestingly enough, is how I actually came into the pagan/heathen faith. I started as in the UCC church and was actually quite active in it through my early, very late teens, early 20s. And even during that time, I was very interested in sort of all of the Apocrypha texts and manuscripts. And the more I dug into that, the more I was like, well, this all makes sense. So while I still, and obviously Gnostics are Christian, but like that's, I guess, what I would have considered myself. And ironically enough, it's funny because I never made this connection, but my first real book on what I would consider a pagan path was I bought in Florida also, Rob.
Don't get out.
And
was it the same week?
I don't think so, but it was. I was in Tampa, not Naples. So, it's that's sort of how I came to it. And I'm what would be called fancy Dutch, and I also grew up in the city. I wasn't in the country, so. My experience with the culture and traditions were a little bit different than probably what Rob's were. But, we still knew about the Braucher who lived down the street on the same block as my mom when she was growing up. And, they went to visit her. But I think for the city Deutsch, there was a bigger push or a bigger sense of needing to assimilate.
I'm sorry. Give me just a moment.
Sorry.
No worries.
Pretty sure that's my adopted dad.
I'm just waiting for some cat to do something here. I was on some interview once, and my cat came right up behind me on the couch and threw up right in front of her way. And
Serious?
then another time I was on, I don't remember, it was relatively recently, and the same thing started happening. I was able to just sort of
at least
myself.
At least Bailey and Willie only
heard
stick
it,
their
huh?
butt in the camera. They don't.
The president of Metro Valley Pagan Pride never stops. I thought I put that on Do Not Disturb. I know I did. Well,
it just means you're popular, which is good.
We're trying to bring back our newsletter, and that was my my secretary. She's kind of been in the beginning. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was actually very into what you were saying, which is part of why I jumped and ran, because it startled me. I was really listening to what you said. We're talking about Florida.
Oh yeah, just that was where I bought my first book, sort of on paganism, like official book. Yeah.
talking about the city Dutch.
Yeah.
City Dutch. Yeah. So I grew up in the city of Reading, which, by the way, is one of the things that needs to be corrected in the audiobook. It is not the city of Reading. It is the city of Reading. So I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, in the city. And like I said, I think my experience with the culture and the background is a little bit different than what Rob's was.
And it's very different from mine.
Right.
Well, Michelle and I only lived a few miles apart.
Right. But the
Yeah.
difference between where I lived and the suburb that I
Wow.
lived in was really that stark. And I think the little bit of a difference too is, as I was saying, was I think for the city Dutch, there was a bigger push, a bigger motivation to assimilate into the general mainstream culture. So a lot of the Dutchy type traditions and superstitions were really pushed out of our foray from day-to-day living.
You know what? That's something like, because I mean, I'm here in West Virginia. We don't have as much city in general, but that is something that I have seen where people become more homogenous in urban areas, and it seems like there are parts of our like historical culture that do get preserved.
Well, it's interesting. I did not grow up where they grew up at all. I grew up in New Jersey, central New Jersey. It exists. But the West, sort of the Western end of that. And yet I was still taught how to make hex signs in school. And I was exposed to some of the cultural stuff. I assume because we were close enough in that Western New Jersey part that was still PA Dutch, right?
Some of that has to do with the old East Jersey and West Jersey colonies.
Right.
And I think too, the other thing is that like, it wasn't necessarily that we didn't still have all those things. What it came down to was the fact that it just was, right? So like, we had Fosnachts on Shrove Tuesday, but you didn't talk about it being a Pennsylvania Dutch thing. It just was. That's what the hex signs that were decorative, like it just was. You didn't really get into the whole detail about, that's part of your culture. And I think from my perspective, I feel like that was a huge loss.
You know what? My uncle and I had this conversation because, you would never have called a healer around here. They may not have had any specific kind of title. They would have just been somebody in the community that you knew stuff. Certainly would never have called them a witch. That would have been an insult. That would have been calling them evil.
But I think what happens then is that like all of those culturally rich traditions and stories and, the lore kind of gets whitewashed, right? Because it just is. So I think when I really started recognizing the value and the beauty of that was when I did go away to college and realized that wasn't how everybody else grew up, and that it was specific to my culture and my background and my heritage, and it made me want to embrace it more, where in the past, like I just thought kind of we were very white bread and didn't have all of that stuff that say like the Italians had or that the Irish had. And a lot of that is an idiosyncrasy of our culture, because we are very much like, you don't talk about yourself, you don't brag. And unfortunately, that's a disservice to ourselves. But
I mean, German is still the largest ethnic group in this country, and Pennsylvania Dutch is a subset of that. Most American things that people consider American food, hamburger, hot dogs, they all have their origin in Germanic food, many of which came from us. And so, the presence of our culture everywhere, so much to the point that people think it's American. And
Right.
That's what Dottie was saying.
Christmas
earlier.
and Easter being two big ones.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So what Dottie was saying earlier is worth mentioning also, that the Pennsylvania Dutch communities within West Virginia also had a lot of things that were still in practice, that were lost in the main heartland of Dutch country. And it's interesting. Well,
Well, yeah, not just the I'm sorry, not just the Dutch, but also like a lot of Irish traditions. You know, a lot of the belief in the Fae and the land spirits. A lot of our cryptids very much mirror older traditions that kind of died out in other places because they were more exposed.
Oh, all right. I
that's
got to
West
show off the
Virginia's
cryptid.
greatest gift, I think.
That's our
Eldritch.
that's our cryptid.
Ooh.
That's the Eldritch.
It's one of our cryptids. Don't
Yeah.
forget. we
One
also
of.
have- Yeah.
The first one I've been able to put onto paper.
This is the Black Heart, the oldest mountains in the world. We got all the cryptids.
Yeah.
If they ain't up there, they're down here or they're in Florida.
Yeah, I
North
mean,
Carolina, there's another hot spot for you.
you know, in the county we grew up in, that Michelle and I grew up in, is considered Appalachia in the north part of it. So, you know, it's
I grew up camping in those woods, on those rivers, in the mountains. Oh, you can feel it when you're there in any part of the Appalachian. You can definitely feel it. And I like the thing I do like, though. I feel like when you say those healers, there were hubs throughout the Appalachian where those healers got to meet and share. And while we seem to have an isolated, you know, our brokers and hexes are up here doing their thing, the ones that traveled seem to have picked up and shared a lot of like the Southern root magic and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, I don't think many people realize just how influential Braucherei was to
Right.
voodoo and, you know, root work and stuff.
Yeah.
And how much was shared back and forth, partially because of our practices being so actively targeted for elimination in the interwar period.
You know that you because we talked about this before, how a lot of the Pennsylvania Dutch had a lot of treaties with the local First Nations.
It wasn't necessarily treaties, but we definitely had a very different relationship between the Pennsylvania Dutch and the English. So quite honestly, I don't think that our people would have survived without the relationship with the Lenape, and it's unfortunate that the vagaries of history, you know, the Lenape, because of being screwed over by William Penn's sons and stuff like that, ended up on the losing side of the French and Indian War, and that cost them dearly. But, you know, those that are still here, many of them also are part of Pennsylvania Dutch. So it's like, yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, it does make sense. A lot of and I think like a lot of it, there's a certain common sense about using, especially herbology. Like that is, you know, that may be a more formalized term for root work, but it is herbology, and those plants. That like there's certainly, the further south you go, there's a lot of different ones down there than there would be more found up north. But essentially, the plant you're working with does certain things no matter where it grows.
Right.
So, and there is something to be said about that conveying of knowledge back and forth. Like it may not have been passing quickly.
And it's interesting. No, we brought, you know, it's interesting to look at what did we bring with us? What seeds did we decide were important enough to carry over the ocean? And then when we got here and shared that information with the Lenape, maybe how did, you know, we have this herb that does these things. Well, this is our herb that does these things. And you know.
And that's, sorry, go ahead. That's what I said.
No, that's it.
And, you know, that's where Mountain Mary's lore comes in. You know, Mountain Mary and a Lenape medicine woman who we have recorded as having a name of either Gray Doe or Doe in the Mist. But, you know, we have not verified that, but that's one piece of our lore that we had. That the two of them exchanged the knowledge. The medicine woman lived and worked near Mountain Mary, and the two of them exchanged the awareness of the plants. And you know, that may be like a legend story, but you know, Doe in the Mist is said to be buried right outside of the the graveyard at Mount Mary's property. And I think that we do a disservice to history by not remembering that these things mattered, and they should have never been allowed to. The relationship between our two people never should have been allowed to crumble. But it's there was a lot of other things too. There were actually shared traditions among certain Pennsylvania Dutch groups and certain Shawnee groups and certain Lenape groups, where they would have functions together in like willow lodges, which seem to be either Lenape or Shawnee in origin, but the function of them within is Pennsylvania Dutch, clearly. So like the groups were each providing an element of their culture to these things that would all come together, and they would recognize these practices. They would just talk and build relationships with each other, and it's
And I think I was just going to say, and I think that's an important segue to reinforcing the fact that you don't have to be Pennsylvania Dutch to practice Or-glawe-veh. That is, like we said earlier, we are an inclusive faith, and anyone who is called to or by our deities, and is more than welcome.
I mean, it is a very rich storytelling.
Yeah, because our people that have money for books.
Right. So wait, okay, so I'm going to use this as a segue to talk about the forest of world trees, because that one blew my mind a little bit. I loved the idea of, because it kind of is this parallel universe description. And I know a lot of people kind of talk about different vibrating dimensions and how they cross over, and that might be creatures, but can you walk us through the forest world?
That came through a specific interview where somebody actually worded it very succinctly. I can picture the woman's face, but I cannot remember right now offhand whether it was a Hexerei or Braucherei context. I think it was a Hexerei context. And we were talking about the world trees, and she had said to me, well, the world tree is a living entity. So a branch could fall off and a new one can grow. She said, well, what we understand of it is old lore, and we understand it'll be there. And if you're gifted with traveling, you can go to these realms, but you might find one that's nobody else has ever reported, or something might be missing because it's a living thing. But she said, also important is the fact that we are one world tree within a forest of world trees, which she was describing. Came across it multiple ways. Either a multiverse of multiverses, or also explaining the other pantheons for other cultures. And
I like that. I actually like that underlying thought, because we don't claim to be the one true way.
But the best thing was that's not the only place that this concept came up. There were other people who talk about, like, if I asked them about the forest of world trees, they would say yes. Our dunkelgegen at the bottom of our tree has roots that reach out and touch the other trees, and so, and that this is how there are some beings who can travel from one world tree to another, and some of them are invasive. Like they were describing these people, these entities which we have encountered, called slicks, that they are like destructive to our world tree, but so like. And then science started realizing that, hey, you know what? Trees do communicate through their roots. Like
Mycelium.
Michelle, your tree, your oak taught me that, my oak in the backyard is the same oak that's your oak, and they connect, so they can talk to each other, and you can always reach out to me, he said. You know what I mean? Like, it was very factual.
And the animist aspect of our culture, does, I think it does really explain this a lot of ways that makes this whole concept of the forest of world trees relevant to our daily lives, because the way that a traditional Pennsylvania person views the land and the relationship with the land is different from the way many people view. We're not in dominance of the world. We're part of it, we act like CEOs who are, don't care about the lower level employees or everything like that. A good CEO will make sure that the bottom part of the triangle or the pyramid is being taken care of because it's the base upon which everything is established. And ad CEOs will just suck and suck and suck from those lower levels until they bleed dry and then crumble. And I really like that allegory when it came up, and it's just, and the more I experience it, the more I believe that it's a good metaphor, a good imagery for actual existence. And we understand the things come to us in forms we can understand. I'm not sure or that we're fully capable of understanding the enormity of all of existence, and that may be an evolutionary thing that will come to us as we begin to grow our consciousness. But the two largest religions of the world, overall, generally speaking, are try to quash people thinking, try to quash consciousness. They want you to just follow the script and believe what you're told. And that's another place where it's our responsibility to help people to be the best they can be and to expand their consciousness and help the human life way to evolve. Sorry, I think it was a soapbox thing there.
No, that's all right. We did talk about, because for those of you who don't know, what month was it? I know it was before November because my office went down, and I really had this month. I got in January now, February now. Thank God, January. That was the longest month of January in a long time.
Hey, it's Groundhog Day too, so
yeah. In our previous episode, we had talked very much about heathens against hate and about the importance of inclusion and things like that. If you're more interested in that part, feel free to check that episode out. I'm gonna put that link in the description. Breaking the fourth wall. Okay. I want to talk about the art. This is one of the things I had on my list. I love, because I always heard them called hex marks.
That's more fractor.
So which element do we want to talk about here first? We didn't design this artwork ourselves. It was derived from the logo that was created, the Or-glawe-veh logo that was created by Kate Color for Good. But so the artists at Llewellyn kind of expounded upon that. The drawings inside the book are from our sister Athena Dugan, but that
I can plug these guys.
Yeah, but
those are our deity hex signs.
Those are really cool.
So this is the Or-glawe-veh logo, and we're using the double-headed distal thing, looking backwards and forwards to the, learning from the past to build a better future, and holding elderberry leaves in the claw, and also the sickle, which, if the hammer is the symbol of Asatru, the sickle is the symbol of Or-glawe-veh, and not due to socialist heathenry, socialist imagery, although it makes for good jokes, but because sickles are closely associated with Hola and the people who followed Hola in the past, except the sickles that the people who followed Hola in the past were worn in their feet. But to heart.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier how it was more like more agricultural based. I think we already talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah. But it is important though, because being attuned to the seasons, being attuned to the cycles, and the way like lots of pagan faiths and heathen faiths and other faiths lay out their year in relative to life cycles. Yule is the beginning of the beginning of a new soul construct. New Year's is the conception, when it's put into the body. And right now that we're at in Or-glawe-veh's and Steining, which is the emergence, it's the baby bump, the potential life showing up, the first manifestation. Ostra then is the birth. It's like it goes throughout the entire year and ends up with Allerliebesziel at the end of October being death. And living your life attuned to that. What we strive to do is to try to recognize the the reality and the beauty and the dignity in each phase of life, which is kind of hard to do in the season we call Stratovus, which is the dying phase. You know, like people, you know, a lot of people aren't afraid of death; they're afraid of the dying process. You know, and it's not an easy one to celebrate, but we're gonna have to go through it, and you know, so being attuned to it, I think, is beneficial to us.
You know what? I love the tangent. I do want to talk more about the art.
Okay.
Michelle, you said a word and I didn't recognize what it was. Could you repeat that?
Yep, fractur, and that's spelled F-R-A-K-T-U-R. It is a Pennsylvania Dutch form of folk art. So the hex signs are very specifically any art that's drawn, like Stacy was showing, within that circle sort of motif. And then obviously within the circle, you have different geometric shapes, you have different art and imagery.
That's that one.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all different hex signs, some of them based on traditional ones, some of them, a lot of them are new. I started doing them in 2020, 19, 20. I'm going to see if I can get a sample of Fractur for you.
Fractur is sort of any standalone Pennsylvania Dutch art that it's very stylized, and has, you know, I don't know how to explain it other like you recognize it when you see it.
Yeah, there's lots of tulips and
Yeah.
Now ours are brighter colored than it descended from your European manuscript artwork and designs and stuff, but ours tended to take on a brighter color, and so it is most closely associated with our culture, but it's present in others as well. But
And that was the one that was you found them, the school teachers would do them for their students, and you found them for baptismal certificates. And it was a way for the teachers, actually, I think it was like one of the first side gigs. The teachers would kind of do the fracture thing on the side.
And birds are big on it, like especially the distal thing.
I will send you a couple of decent fractures things if you don't. Is that okay if I take that, guys?
Yeah. You can just drop them on. Well, sorry.
No, I just didn't want to. I didn't know if anyone else wanted to throw anything at.
No, Stacey, I depend on you to take your stuff and pull stuff out of my mind and Michelle's mind and make it happen. Stacey's pull images from my head.
I've become the resident. Well, I think I was an artist before, I guess. I tried to call myself an artist, but I really found the folk art inspiration when I became an Urglaawe, and it is a wealth of inspiration. I never lack for something to create. That's for sure.
Yeah, you have the opposite problem.
I lack for time.
Yeah.
You know what? That actually brings me to what I want to get an individual answer from each of you. What was your favorite part of this process?
The eureka moments, the moments where I realized that something that I had always heard and people say or do throughout my life were actually heathen or pagan in origin, and or that I would suddenly realize that something my grandfather said was referring to it's raining, it's snoring, it's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring. Who's the old man? And realizing, oh my God, they're talking about Donor. They're talking, or they're talking and those moments, I think that there's something exciting about the mind shift that not for everybody. Some people get stressed out by it, but the way I see it is that people say that the racist groups or the exclusionary groups always say that well, this is for the white people. There's a whole lot of white people that paganism and heathenry they're not ready for paganism or heathenry, while many people of other backgrounds might be, because a lot of people just change the trappings from Christianity to commercial looking, cool looking heathen stuff without changing the mindset. And there's a process that we try to encourage of looking around the world and seeing it with different eyes. And once you start actually seeing that happen, it's kind of fun for me to see people who are new to heathenry or paganism experience that, and they suddenly start saying, "Oh, I never realized that." Like that tree is always called them. Like I always felt a distraction. I never realized why, and then like they have a reason that they came across. And that without that mind shift, you're essentially still a Christian. Just it's like a Christian in dry dock or something, and that can be kind of dangerous because that's like Christianity is a very hierarchical system. We try to be like a more community-based system. The three of us and a few others, we're kind of a core team, and we do keep the only control we keep on there is we try to make sure that Or-glawe-veh can't be, appropriated for racist purposes and stuff like that. But that mind shift to me, I still have occasional moments where I come across something that I never put together as something I heard or saw when I was a kid, and then realized that, oh my gosh, that's something that I've been talking my whole life, and now all of a sudden, here today, I need this information, and I just realized that the gods have been talking to me throughout my entire life, or my ancestors have been talking to me. I just didn't realize where it was coming from, and I love when that happens for other people. It makes me so happy seeing people get that excitement.
It happened for me even being a pagan for a long time. That shift of, well, I was being prepared for my current role, but you and Urglaawe didn't exist yet. So I was trained somewhere else, and I was taught some things that I would need to know. And it was very interesting when I would the white woman behind the tree when I first got initiated into Wicca. It was a British traditional BTW group. And I remember seeing her. I meditated all day, and I fasted all day, and I was hallucinating, right? It wasn't a hallucination. Years later, something happened within one of our circles where I realized she was the one who was there guiding me and keeping me, up and ready to bat next to when I found, later when I found you. It was all very puzzle piecey.
I think for me, my favorite part of the process, I guess, was being able to take all those things that I just understood, like, to be part of my life growing up, and share it within the context of Urglaawe, and getting that out to the next generation and to those folks who want to learn.
Very cool. Very cool. What different parts, like, how do the three of you work together? Because it's a cohesive book.
So I started the outline in 2017, and we had a lot of fits and starts with the book from that time until I guess about 2021. And when we first started this book, the intent was like a much more pared down, essentially like a life, a day in the life of your typical Urglaawe, where we would talk about the holidays and we would talk about the life cycles, but it was really nothing more than that. And then we kind of decided, if we're going to do this, let's do it. And we had originally thought we would have a whole bunch of contributors to the book, which just kind of became like too many cooks in the kitchen. And we pared it down to the three of us with 2 additional contributors plus Athena for the artwork. But, we always joke we're the 3 little Libras. I don't know if that's a good thing or a hindrance, but we at least all have
Libra triplet powers.
We at least all have the same mindset where we're working together. So I think that does help. And I think also, first and foremost, the 3 of us, are good friends outside of the tradition too. So Not to say that we're not friends with other people within the group.
No, we love it. We love them all.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is considered a friend, but the three of us like are pretty thick as thieves, and being able to look each other in the face and be like, "You're pissing me off. It's time to like get down to it." Like, and know that like we're not actually gonna piss each other off. That it's just a matter of we're gonna be honest, and the other person's gonna take that criticism constructively rather than being offended. So I think, I think that that's part of it for sure.
I think we didn't realize how much was going to go into it because the editing process was harder. We didn't realize how much we'd have to rewrite.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And I have to say this, and I say this all the time. Like, had Stacy not come on board, this book would have never happened. And I mean, I can't emphasize that enough.
Part of it is because a lot of the stuff I had written was published somewhere. So it couldn't be used as it was, you know. And the other big hindrance was when I got COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that knocked me out for 2 years, essentially. And
well, one of the things I remember saying, like, I came into this without ego. This was your information. I was just editing at that first when we first started together, the three of us working on the book. I really had it in my mind. I was just editing. I was helping you get this thing together. And then, rewriting everything had to happen.
Let me put it this way. You know, I'm going to say this so that Dottie can edit it out if it's not appropriate. But Stacy got so focused on the book that we were down up against one of our deadlines, and Stacy was banging away on the computer. We were a Free Spirit gathering, working up closer to midnight. And her husband Michael and I were sitting there. I was trying to work on stuff too, but there was something going on in a tent just like a few feet behind us that involved 4 people, and it was so
and no clothes.
And Michael and I are sitting there staring at each other, and Stacy just like and then she looked up. She looked up after the loud ending, and she looked at Michael and she goes, "What?"
My nickname isn't Oblivious Girl for nothing.
But that was just how dedicated she was to finishing that process off. And because I will admit I have trouble rewriting things that I've written sometimes.
Of course you would. It's hard, absolutely. And I felt, you know, like for me it was like relearning things that I had heard, but I was reading, but I had read before. It's not easy to write a color list 5 different ways, but we pulled it off. The things that involved Pennsylvania Dutch, that was, you know, I did all that. But oh god, yeah.
But that was a great time to talk about the audio version.
Yes, let's talk about the audio version. Like, you can find it on Audibles. That's how I was able to kind of get enough of the information to really talk about this book, because y'all know I've got a learning disorder and the winter has not been easy.
Well,
no.
So I listened to the audio version, and the moment I said that before we started, I saw a collective there was this collective moment.
Well, the reader's voice is lovely for English. Like I enjoy listening to her and everything like that. We have found that she has narrated Amish romance novels and things like that, which may have a Pennsylvania Dutch word or two in them, but not words like, you know, the word for interdependence. And like you can actively hear her stop, like pause for a second to try to figure the word out. And I would say
we gotta find her and buy her a cup of coffee.
I would say, like, listen to the audiobook, but just beware that a lot of the Pennsylvania Dutch pronunciation is some of it she pronounces like German, and it gets close enough, but and
of course, my pet peeve that she doesn't pronounce the city of Reading correctly.
And there's she doesn't say Or-glawe-veh either, like Or-glawe-veh. She doesn't say that properly either.
Yeah, Or-glawe-veh.
She says the same way as Or-glawe-veh. But
the plurals, yeah, it's weird.
But, that's the adherence to Or-glawe-veh. But it's still fine, and I do kind of support it. But I'm thinking to myself, there must be something we could suggest that if not one of us, maybe Ralph could actually, narrate or something like that. But because I don't want people thinking that that's how we pronounce the words, because some of the words were unintelligible to me the way I heard them, and we had no say in who read it. But I'm guessing that there's only so many people who would say, "Hey, I can read Pennsylvania Dutch words."
Right.
The words that they're used to hearing are the words that are known in Dutchified English, things like that. Then all of a sudden they come across, Geschustig am Heckenkate, and they don't know how to say it. Or Wasser darf Übergang gebraucht.
That's the one.
And so chapter 2, I never made it past chapter 2 because
I haven't either, actually.
it got me a little too upset. But you see, there are there are entire readings that are in Pennsylvania Dutch in later chapters, and I'm afraid to go to them. But
You know what? That's fair. That reminds me, because like I am of the generation where the best you could do was maybe find a book on paganism at the bookstore, and you may not know another pagan, or the other pagan you may know is the other high school girl. I'm from the craft generation.
Samhain and
Samhain, yeah. We all say Samhain, and I still pronounce it Hecate. I still pronounce her name Hecate.
Yeah.
And I know it's Hecate, or
yeah, that's it.
it's Hecate.
Hecate.
Another way. I can't remember other ways.
There's a whole chant with Hecate, with it pronounced Hecate. Don't worry about it.
Right. But I mean, that's kind of like one of the things, like especially.
Seal.
Oh yeah, I thought it was docile. I thought it was docile.
Jason. Oh. Gotcha.
Widdershins.
Yeah.
Things like that. I mean, these are Wiccan terms for those who may not be as aware, but like it's not pronounced Samhain, it's Samhain. But if you've only ever seen it written,
Right,
heard it said,
right.
there's no amount of writing out a pronunciation that makes it any easier to hear in your mind.
Right.
Like
And
your brain is always going to go default.
and
It's funny when I read books that have foreign words that I don't know, or like names. When I was reading in French class in high school, and we came across names, if I couldn't pronounce it in my head, I gave it a nickname, and I never bothered with it. I moved on.
Well, Pennsylvania Dutch also has the weird distinction of actually being worse than English when it comes to spelling. Because there is no formal spelling system or that's widely accepted. Within Or-glaw-veh, we have accepted one of the most common ones, but even that's had to change because PA-Dutchdictionary.com is accessible to everybody, so we're converting over to their system. And so I've had to learn to rewrite words with different spelling systems, and someday English is going to have to go through that. It's going to be horrible. But I don't blame people for not being able to read Pennsylvania Dutch. It's alphabetically. If you know the combinations, you won't have trouble with it. But the vowels, there are more vowels in Pennsylvania Dutch than there are in English, and that confuses people. And but
because it's more spoken than it is written.
Yes, I mean we write it a lot in Or-glaw-veh, but not every other community does. And it's because it is English and Pennsylvania Dutch are the official languages of Or-glaw-veh, so we try to produce as much stuff in both languages as possible. But it's so I feel bad for the reader. I don't know whether they gave her the book up front with the focusing on the pronunciation section that is in the book. Yeah, there was a different pronunciation section that I wanted to use. I wanted to use the one that we use in the Pennsylvania Dutch class that I teach at Bucks County Community College, but they had a different way that they wanted laid out, and that's just not what I'm used to. But so if you're listening to our book, and please enjoy the English, it's beautiful. Her voice is wonderful, but just be wary of the Pennsylvania Dutch pronunciations. And at some point, we might have to put up of versions of those words being pronounced the way that we say them.
Kind of like a verbal errata.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
You know what? That may not be a bad idea. You could go on like YouTube and do like shorts. Like this
Yeah.
word is pronounced like this. That'd be some great way to advertise.
One chapter.
Oh my God,
for each-
that's a copious spare time problem.
But that wouldn't be terrible. There's not, Deutsch words for each chapter. That's not too much of a chunk.
I think you hit the section with the howling.
I can see the fear.
Oh no, you're doing that one.
I can see the fear in your voice.
It's not the fear. It's just I wish that there was some easier way to do it, but I don't think there is. So we have to fix that.
Okay, folks, I think we're hitting it about an hour, maybe a little bit over, maybe a little bit under when this all gets edited. What if you all enjoy this book? I'll put it up again. I'll probably take a really good picture instead of just holding it up to the screen like I am now. So you may actually be able to see the book rather than the reflection of my computer. But there's the heathen tradition of the Pennsylvania Dutch and Or-glawe-veh Primer. Did I pronounce that right?
The word that I'm not sure how to pronounce there is primer versus primer. I've always heard both, and so it looks like primer to me, but I actually think primer is the proper pronunciation.
Really?
But I love the title of the book as long as I don't have to say it aloud.
You know what? I've always heard it primer because you're priming somebody to do something like this.
And there's only one M, but I believe that I actually looked it up and it gave primer as the primary. It's a weird primer as the primary. It should be primer as the primary. But
Oh, okay. I can't do any more pronunciation stuff. I'm gonna be tripping over my tongue all week now.
We broke Donnie.
What other, like, where do people kind of go from here? Like, they can find this on Amazon, they've read it, they want to maybe look more into the practice, consider becoming a practitioner of Or-glawe-veh.
adherent. Practitioner would be Braucherei or Hexerei. Adherent or Or-glawe-veh would be the religion aspect. Well, our most active community is on Facebook. And it's just Or-glawe-veh as the group name. We have a Discord server also. I hate to say it, but like my email is where things go to die, and because there's just so much junk in there. But the Or-glawe-veh, the Or-glawe-veh group is active. It's very active, and that would be the next place to go. And on Instagram, people I think can access it too, right? I don't know how that works.
Yeah. I can collect some links for you and get them up for you. I will get the website link, and we do have a website. We have a lot of stuff there.
The largest groups are Distelfink Sip Shop in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, and Delaware. But there are some people like in Western Pennsylvania that could meet on their own as a subset of Distelfink. Chicago has a strong leadership and a sip shop. They're a freehold out there, and we have the new ones in
Indiana,
and
Well, I guess it's like northern Indiana, southern Illinois.
yeah,
right,
and
Arkansas. Justin's in Arkansas.
So there are
And Stacy's out on the West Coast with Stevie, in Washington, I think.
Yes.
Yep.
Washington
And
State.
there are Or-glawe-veh in many states, and it's just that a lot of them don't have somebody hasn't felt comfortable or ready yet to step up and bring a community together. And I tell people, what, learn about the practice, about the religion. If you're comfortable with it, talk to us, because we share our ritual formats and everything like that, because not everybody's gonna know how to write Pennsylvania Dutch, and so we try to make it as easy for people to get started as possible. We also encourage people to adjust the calendar the Or-glawe-veh calendar is the agricultural cycles as they are in Berks and Lancaster counties in Pennsylvania, primarily, like Zone 6A. But some people don't live in that area. Like, when Arden was still in California, she adjusted the practices to fit that area. Rather than building a butsamon made of plant material, they built one out of clay. And then instead of burning it in an area that's prone to wildfires, what did they do? Dissolve it in
Water. Yeah.
And that stuff's acceptable because it's the relationship to the land where you live is extremely important. And so being attuned to the cycles of our season doesn't help people who don't live in our environment. And we have an active Or-glawe-veh in South Africa now too.
Mhm.
And so that has to be we flip the calendar.
That might be a good way to point out we are a living tradition, not a static reconstruction. We are a living, breathing, and growing tradition.
That was actually something I heard in the audiobook where it talked about how it is an orthopraxy, not an orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of a good way to describe the differences of it being more of a living connectivity and a practice, with the understanding of if we practice, you can't expect perfection, only progress.
Orthodoxy is dangerous. Orthodoxy is what caused many people throughout the world to be exterminated for not believing the way the church believed. Orthopraxy just means that you can do what you want at home. Each of us has some personal beliefs that are divergent from what Or-glawe-veh canon is, including me. And my big one is that I think that butsamon can be burned anytime in Aller-liebesjähr. It just says so Aller-liebesjähr ends, but most people actually say it has to be done by the sunset on October 31st. And so when I'm by myself at home, I can do what I want. But when the community is together, that butsamon has to be burned up by sunset October 31st. So anybody can, if you want to put a picture of Jesus up on your altar, you can do it, but not when we're all together. We're all and not representing Or-glawe-veh. So everybody has a right to their sovereignty of self and their sovereignty of consciousness. We just ask that we keep Or-glawe-veh as a distinct entity, guarded, because our culture is technically threatened and guarded by the group's way of practicing. Not thinking. We can't control your thoughts. I don't want to control your thoughts. I have enough trouble of my own.
Same. Same. Okay, folks. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah. Again, yes, definitely go check out, and I will put all the links below, including the link to Llewellyn Press, I believe. And the pronounced audiobook on Audible. Any links you've got, feel free to share them. And definitely the link to the episode we did about Heathens Against Hate.
And I found a copy of the book at Barnes and Noble. So
Nice.
So it's out there, y'all. It's out there. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you,
us.
Daddy.
Is there anything you want to say before we go? Is there any?
Well, it's Groundhog Day, and Groundhog Day gathered the American culture from us, from the Pennsylvania Dutch. And but it's not just a simple thing about a rodent being in a box. This is a very old observance that's tied to the messenger creatures from the world tree. This is perhaps our most pagan or heathen observance. And the real stories behind Groundhog Day are far more interesting than anything that's happening in Punxsutawney today. There are people who already have gone out into the wild in the autumn and identified groundhog burrows and have been watching what the groundhogs have been doing throughout the winter. And that now if the groundhogs are active right now, that's when the early spring thing would be predicted.
Oh my God! I watched poor Punxsutawney Phil. That poor groundhog looked like he'd been drugged. He was not awake. He was not He was not here for it.
And I always say, how could he not see his shadow with all of the camera
flashing
lights?
lights.
Like, well, I
This
can
year,
see, like they probably lit the whole thing, like, you know, these 5 Victorian style guys in their top hats and proper canes. Like, they really do decide if you're going to see the shadow or not. Like, you know, we could get into a whole hour.
Yeah, that was a scandal for us, around Punxsutawney Pete, the Phil's predecessor. That, you know, there were syndicates that lost money because of his predictions. But there's a whole bunch of lore about the groundhogs. But you know, this really is a thing that, you know, it probably died out in many areas of the digest. There are still people who do go out and actually prognosticate from the animal's behaviors. That's not a natural environment. However, much like the kitsch culture of the 50s that had Amish people painting hex signs, which doesn't happen, it may not be accurate or true to the actual nature of the tradition, but it helped keep the tradition alive because it helped keep awareness on things. And so I have to give a nod to the Punxsutawney people for, you know, keeping the tradition in the public's mind, thereby allowing us to take people who are already familiar with it and give them more information about what the actual origins of this are. So
We need to have you back. We're just going to do a whole episode about, like, comparative holiday structures, like Wheel of the Year, pagan versus heathens versus like Christian holidays.
and
How
Pandora's
like,
box.
we
get
all
like 12 people
Wheel
from
of the Year, just rename shit.
get like 12 people from different branches of heathenry and paganism and ask them when Yule is, and see if you can get Facebook started.
Hey, isn't Wicca the religion of if it's not nailed down, steal it? I mean, and then steal the nail?
Right,
But that has to be done depending on the horns of the moon.
No, just screenshot it and put your shit together later. It's fine.
Okay.
That was a little rough. That might have been a little unkind.
No, that's fine.
I mean, it is essentially, like, especially with the Wheel of the Year, there is a high point and a low point. The moon and the sun, they wax and they wane at about the same rate. So I can kind of understand how different religions that are still nature-based practices, still agricultural-based practices, are going to run into the same holidays. Because
it's interesting because Michelle and I are both dual trad, so we also practice in do you consider it Wiccan?
No.
What do you are just
eclectic pagan.
Eclectic paganism, and I do practice with a Wiccan group. So, well, yeah, they call themselves Wiccan.
Black Forest.
It is way
Black
more
Forest fan,
casual than Wicca. Gotta say, it's like if it is basically Appalachian Wicca.
But while we're at it, I mean, we as well mention this. Black Forest Clan, Silver Ravenwolf has written Hexcraft, which Silver Ravenwolf is also Pennsylvania Dutch. So, just Or-glawe-veh wasn't around back then, but she and I do share a lot of information with each other, and so
I think that's why it fits so well for me together. It fits very comfortably together.
Right. Yeah. One of these days I'll have to talk her into coming on here too. I bet that'd be a hoot. I think I've got one of her first edition Teen Witches. That was like the book that survived the many purges, the waxing and waning of life. I got it in high school.
She's a delightful person, and she's a very caring community person, and I would say that I could give her a call for you.
I'm sure her ears are twitching right now. But we have been recording for an hour and a half. So thank you guys again for coming on. You all can find more about them through all the links below. And you can find more about me at dottiephpsychic.com. Safe travel and much profit to you.
Thank you for joining me at Madame Tortuga's Lounge. In case you didn't know, I am actually a full-time professional psychic with another YouTube channel. I'm also a part of Metro Valley Pagan Pride, and if you'd like to learn about all of those things, you can find out more at dottieThepsychic.com. That's dottieThepsychic.com. Safe travel and much profit to you.